I thought I was a good husband. For 62 years, I believed that. My name is James. I'm 84 years old, and it wasn't until my wife was gone that I understood I'd been looking at our marriage through the wrong lens the entire time. I met Margaret when I was 22, fresh out of the service, working at a hardware store in Pittsburgh. She came in looking for paint thinner, and I spent 20 minutes helping her pick the right kind, even though there were only 3 options. She had this way of listening that made you feel like what you were saying actually mattered. We were married 8 months later in a small church ceremony with maybe 40 people there. Her father didn't approve of me much, thought I didn't have enough ambition, but Margaret looked at me like I hung the moon, and that was all I needed. I provided for her. That's what men did back then. What we were supposed to do. I worked for the same manufacturing company for 37 years. Came home every night, paid the mortgage, made sure the bills were covered. I never cheated, never raised my hand, never came home drunk. I was faithful and steady and reliable. When people asked Margaret about me, she'd smile and say I was a good man, and I was proud of that. I thought being a good husband meant showing up, being dependable, keeping your word. I thought it meant not failing in the ways that destroy families. We had 3 children. Margaret wanted 4, but after the 3rd I told her we should stop, that it was getting expensive and I didn't want to stretch things too thin. She agreed, the way she always agreed with me about practical matters. I made most of the big decisions in our marriage, not because I demanded it, but because it seemed natural. I decided when we'd buy a new car, when we'd replace the roof, when the kids were old enough for certain freedoms. Margaret handled the house and the children during the day, and I handled everything else. She'd ask my opinion, and I'd give it, and that would be that. It seemed like partnership to me. But here's what I didn't see. What I couldn't see, because I was too busy congratulating myself for being dependable. Margaret had dreams that got folded up and put away in a drawer somewhere. She'd wanted to go back to school, maybe become a teacher. She mentioned it once when our youngest started kindergarten. Said she'd been thinking about it. I told her it didn't make sense financially, that we were doing fine on one income, and why rock the boat? She nodded, said I was probably right, and that was the last time she brought it up. I didn't ask her about it again. I didn't ask because I'd already given my answer, and in my mind that settled it. She loved photography. Did I ever tell you that? Probably not, because I barely paid attention to it myself. She had this old camera her brother gave her, and she'd take pictures of the kids, of our street, of the way light came through the kitchen window in the afternoon. A few times she talked about taking a class, maybe joining a photography club she'd heard about at the library. I never said no outright, but I didn't encourage it either. I'd say things like, if you want to, or that's up to you, which sounds supportive, until you realize it meant she was on her own to figure out the logistics, to carve out time that didn't exist in a schedule already full of cooking and cleaning and children. Eventually the camera stayed in the closet more than it came out. I thought I was listening to her. When she talked, I was there in the room, nodding, responding. But I was listening the way you listen to background noise, to something pleasant but not essential. I wasn't really hearing what she was saying beneath the words. When she'd tell me about her day, I'd half listen while reading the newspaper, offering the occasional aha or that's nice. If she seemed upset about something, I'd try to fix it with practical solutions, instead of just sitting with her in whatever she was feeling. I thought that's what she needed from me. Someone to solve things, someone to make decisions, so she didn't have to worry. The years went by the way years do when you're not paying close attention. Kids grew up, moved out, started their own families. Margaret and I settled into a routine that felt comfortable. We had dinner together every night, watched our shows, went to bed at the same time. From the outside, we probably looked like one of those couples who'd figured it out who'd made it work when so many others hadn't, and maybe we had in a way. But I didn't know what was happening inside her, what she was carrying that she'd stopped trying to share with me. About 5 years ago, she started painting. Just watercolors at first. Small things she'd do at the kitchen table in the afternoons. I'd come home and see them drying by the window, these delicate little landscapes and flowers. I'd glance at them, say they were nice, and move on to whatever I needed to do next. I never asked her what made her start painting, never asked what she was trying to express, or if she'd thought about showing them to anyone. They were just something she did, like her gardening or her crossword puzzles. I didn't understand that this was her trying to leave something out that had been pressed down for decades. She got sick 3 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. They told us it was stage 4. That treatment might buy some time but wouldn't cure it. I took care of her the way I'd taken care of everything else in our marriage. I managed her medications, drove her to appointments, made sure she ate even when she didn't want to. I was dutiful and thorough. I was a good husband. One night, maybe 6 months before she died, we were sitting in the living room. She was too weak to do much by then, just sat in her chair with a blanket over her legs, even though it was summer. Out of nowhere, she said, "I wish I'd traveled more." I looked up from the book I was reading, and she was staring out the window at nothing in particular. I said, "We traveled. Remember that trip to Florida? And we went to Niagara Falls with the kids." She smiled, this small, sad smile, and said, "I know, that's not what I meant." Then she changed the subject, asked if I wanted tea. I should have asked her what she meant. I should have put down my book and really looked at her and said, "Tell me about it. Tell me where you wanted to go, what you wanted to see." But I didn't. I let the moment pass because it made me uncomfortable, because opening that door meant looking at things I'd spent 60 years not looking at. She died on a Tuesday morning early before the sun was fully up. I was holding her hand. Our daughter was there. Our 2 sons were driving in but didn't make it in time. In those last few minutes, when her breathing got slow and far apart, she squeezed my hand and whispered something I couldn't quite hear. I leaned in close, and she said it again. "You were good to me, James." Then she was gone. I held on to those words for weeks. You were good to me. I turned them over and over in my mind like a prayer, like proof that I'd done right by her. But slowly, as I lived alone in a house that still smelled like her, that still had her paintings on the walls and her books on the nightstand, those words started to sound different. Not wrong, but incomplete. I was good to her. I provided. I protected. I stayed. But was I good with her? Did I walk beside her, or did I just assume she'd walk beside me while I led the way? I started looking through her things, not to clean them out, but just to understand her better, now that she wasn't here to explain herself. I found a journal she'd kept on and off over the years. I almost didn't read it, felt like I was invading her privacy even though she was gone. But I needed to know. I needed to see what I'd missed. She wrote about feeling invisible sometimes. Not neglected, not mistreated, but invisible. Like she'd become part of the furniture of our life together. She wrote about the things she'd wanted to try, places she'd wanted to go, conversations she'd wanted to have. She wrote about loving me, and I believe she did. But she also wrote about wondering what her life might have looked like if she'd been braver, if she'd pushed back more, if I'd asked more questions instead of making more decisions. There was one entry from about 10 years ago that I keep coming back to. She wrote, "James is a good husband. I know so many women who would trade places with me in a heartbeat, but sometimes I wonder if he sees me as a person or as a role I'm filling. His wife, the mother of his children, the woman who keeps his house. I wonder if he knows what I think about late at night, what makes me laugh really hard, what I'm afraid of. I wonder if he's ever been curious." Reading that broke something in me that I don't think will ever fully heal, because she was right. I wasn't curious. I thought I knew her because I'd spent 62 years with her, but I'd spent those years next to her, not with her. I'd been a good husband in all the ways that are easy to measure. I'd failed her in all the ways that actually matter. I think about all the conversations we didn't have. All the times I could have asked, "What are you thinking about right now?" Or "What do you wish we'd done differently?" Or "What do you need from me that I'm not giving you?" I think about how I prioritized my comfort over her growth, how I mistook her accommodation for agreement, how I live her make herself smaller so I could stay the same size. People tell me not to be so hard on myself, that I was a product of my time, that I did the best I could with what I knew. Maybe that's true, but it doesn't change the fact that my wife lived a half-lived life in some ways, and I was too busy being a good husband to notice. It doesn't change the fact that she died with things unsaid, dreams untried, parts of herself unexpressed, and I could have helped with that. I could have been curious. I could have asked. If you're married, if you're in a partnership of any kind, let me tell you something I learned too late. Being a good husband or a good wife or a good partner, it's not about checking boxes. It's not about fidelity and providing and showing up, though those things matter. It's about seeing the person you're with as a whole human being with an interior life as complex as your own. It's about being curious, asking questions, making space for them to grow even when that growth feels inconvenient or scary. It's about partnership, real partnership, where both people are steering the ship together instead of one person captaining while the other just tries to keep things running below deck. Margaret used to paint these watercolors, and after she died, our daughter had one of them framed for me. It hangs in my kitchen now, where I see it every morning. It's a painting of a path through some woods, and the path curves out of sight so you can't see where it leads. I look at it and I think about all the paths Margaret might have walked if I'd walked beside her, instead of assuming my path was enough for both of us. I was a good husband. I'm not trying to erase that or pretend I was some kind of monster. I wasn't. But I wasn't a good partner. I didn't cherish her interior life the way I should have. I didn't make space for all of who she was. And now she's gone, and I can't get those years back. I can't ask her the questions I should have asked. I can't tell her that I see her now, really see her, and I'm sorry it took losing her to open my eyes. So if there's someone in your life who you love, who you've built a life with, don't wait until they're gone to get curious about who they really are. Don't assume that because they're there every day you know them. Don't mistake their presence for partnership. Ask them what they dream about. Ask them what they wish they'd tried. Ask them what they need from you that they've been too tired or too afraid to ask for themselves. And then listen. Really listen. Not to fix or solve, but just to understand. I'm 84 years old, and I'm sitting in a house full of 62 years of memories, and I'm realizing that I missed so much of the woman I spent all those years with. I loved her. God, I loved her. But love isn't enough if you don't tend to it, if you don't stay curious, if you don't keep choosing to see the person beside you as someone still becoming, still dreaming, still deserving of your full attention. Margaret, if somehow you can hear this, I want you to know that I see you now. I see all the things you held inside, all the dreams you folded up to make room for mine, all the ways you made yourself small so our life could feel big. I'm sorry I didn't ask. I'm sorry I thought being good to you was the same as being good with you. You deserved a partner, and I gave you a provider. You deserved curiosity, and I gave you routine. You were good to me, more than I deserved, and I wish I'd spent our years together, making sure you knew how much of you I saw, and valued, and cherished. I can't go back. That's the hardest truth I've had to accept at this age. I can't redo those 62 years. But I can tell you this, whoever you are listening to an old man's regrets, don't make my mistake. Don't assume that being good is good enough. Don't let the person you love become invisible while they're standing right in front of you. Be curious. Ask questions. Make space. Be a partner, not just a spouse, because one day they'll be gone, and you'll be sitting alone wondering how you missed so much of someone you thought you knew everything about. That's all I've got to say. That's what I learned too late. I hope you hear it in time.